Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Welcome! Welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the podcast where we'll take 1/6 of a year to talk about a whole year's worth of movies.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're, of course, happy to have you here. We feel confident. I feel confident. I don't know about you, Ryan. I feel confident we are getting through 2021 today. We are going to wrap this bad boy up, talk about some pretty cool movies, some other less than cool movies, some movies that might be
based on the incredible true story.
I don't know if they are or not. Maybe,
maybe.
I don't know. Maybe we'll see. I guess maybe if by the time we reach the end of this podcast, we find out that a meteor is on its way, we could say, oh, hell, hey, it's kind of
ripped from the headlines.
Yeah, who knew? So, all right, let's jump right into it. We are going to first talk about some movies, a chunk of movies directed by women, starring women, I think for the most part, starring women. Yeah, starring women. Let's talk about The World to Come first. Let me give you the plot synopsis on this one. Somewhere along the mid-19th century American East Coast frontier, two neighboring couples battle hardship and isolation, witnessed by a splendid yet testing landscape, challenging them both physically and psychologically.
So it's an early Frontiers movie. It's very, very poetic. There's tons of voiceover in this film. Normally, that's a sign for some of us where we're like, this is really pretentious and I'm not going to like this, or this is really pretentious and this is my cup of tea. Either way, super pretentious, just really super pretentious. It's really like having a really smart person read a novel to you. But it's really pretty. It's a really beautifully shot film, and they're showing this sort of frontiers life of these farmers trying to eke it out in sort of a dangerous world is interesting. And as you can imagine, there's something of a tragic connection that happens between these two wives of these frontiersmen, and in a world where there's just no place for such a thing. And it's about the emotional struggles that go along with that. And I thought it was pretty good. There's really good cast. It's four main characters. Really, you interact with a couple other people, but it really is these two couples, these four people. Who's the main woman in it? She's really, really great.
The two main women, Catherine Waterston and Vanessa Kirby.
Yeah, but Catherine Waters, really both super cast type. Catherine Waterston is this person eking out this sort of humble life who's had some tragedy. Most of the tragedy in the women of these times life typically have to do with child rearing, either giving birth or, accidents that happen, or, it really is the Wild West, and it's a sort of unfeeling and cold world that it presents to you. And Vanessa Kirby's, although a kind of a simple lady herself doing a similar kind of thing, comes across as all the more sort of worldly and sophisticated. And so it really is about those two ladies' connections. And I don't have to go into the details about what that implies, because you get to discover it as the movie goes on. It's totally a character piece. And the two husbands have rather thankless roles, but producer, actor, Casey Affleck's a big reason why this movie exists. So we'll give a shout out to him. He plays Waterston's husband in a really interesting human way, and in a sensitive way that's pretty, that makes this film interesting. There aren't any monsters really in this movie. It's the times that are monstrous, and it's almost a survival movie in that way. But I liked it. It's pretty very self-assured, but just, man, Catherine Waterston just talking in your ear, but she never shuts up. And that's not for everybody. Even me, it's like, let the thing happen a little bit. You don't have to tell me every damn thing. And of course but it's still really, really well written. And as a narrative, as a character in your head, telling you a story, it is very effective, and it really, really well written. Like, just for the dialogue, it's based on a book, so I assume that stuff's all read out of the book, first person. There's only one way or there's two ways to do it, really. If you can't half-ass it, you either embrace that first person aspect of it and do what they did in this, or you jettison it, which really is a challenge when that's the strength of the material you're working with. Sure. So I thought it was pretty good, but it won't be for everybody. It's really low budget indie film. It's got some big movie stars in it. They all do these days, but I like that. I like when actors who could have chosen this or that and made a little more money choose something little like this that needs a champion. And
this is only and this is only the director's second film that she's directed. Well,
and like I say, Casey's been accused of some bad onset behavior and some other things.
Yes, he has.
Not so much like sexual harassment, but just sort of being a jerk when he's been the director of stuff, which he has been a couple of times. Again, he sort of made this movie happen, so his heart is in it, and his performance is, even though he's a recognizable face in an important role, you still feel the sort of artistic integrity that comes with knowing what your role is and taking a back seat to the whole thing in both ways. And I found that to be pretty admirable. I don't know if there's a sense of atonement for that. I think he's always been like that. I think he's been playing these, especially early in his career, he plays all these dumb frat boys, basically, because that's how Hollywood sees him. I think he's always been this suffering, pretentious artist at heart. I think that comes through all this stuff.
Sure.
And it does here too. And the ladies really do shine, both the filmmaker, because it's very full of directorial flourishes, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the two main characters and especially Waterston, who we never ever lose track of during the story. It's I admired it a lot. It was tough to enjoy. We'll see. I'll have to revisit it and see if knowing what happens lets me sort of appreciate the filmmaking more. Sometimes that happens. This is a movie where that's certainly a possibility. So.
Well, very cool. All right. Next up is Halle Berry, returning not just on screen, but behind the camera as well. Halle Berry directing and starring in Bruised as a disgraced MMA fighter, finding redemption in the cage and the courage to face her demons when the son she had given up as an infant unexpectedly re-enters her life.
A lot of these on this list, a little more than half of these women directing women films are first time directorial debut directing efforts by women who are more famous for being actors than directors. Maybe that'll change, probably not, but that's neat. Halle Berry, Halle Berry starring in a Halle Berry production film by Halle Berry. It does feel a little silly when you're watching the credits. But this is a passion project of hers, clearly.
Right.
And this is a script that has, like we talked about last show, it's passed through a bunch of different hands on its way to being this thing. It's an outstanding performance, as you would expect from her. What did Brian say to us? Brian Bevel, he had that great quote about if you want to see how good a director is, you know, at least from a visual storytelling aspect, make him direct a boxing movie. This isn't exactly a boxing movie. It's a kickboxing movie, I guess, you know,
right.
Ultimate fighting movie, but those can be pretty great too. You really do feel like you're a part of those sequences. Her relationship with her kid, her relationship with her mom, they're all complicated and they're all feel familiar, but none of them really ever drift into cliches, which is really, I'm super impressed by that, both in the scripting and in sort of her handling of it.
Sure.
But it's a dark, gritty, you know, bad side of town type of movie where this person who's just a fighter, she's just wired that way. It's in her blood. She fights. Finding a way back into, you know, when you take the fight away from a person like that, they're just, you know, the film sort of demonstrates you're cast adrift. And this film's about sort of finding that, getting that back, both literally and metaphorically. So it's all a little on the nuts, but this film was really an easy watch. It's exciting. There's tons of human drama in it. The fights are great. She gets into this fight like away from the fights. It's not quite a bar fight, but she gets bullied by a rather successful at the time Ultimate Fighter into getting into basically a street fight with her, and it's wow. Powerful, you know, and that's hard. We've seen all this before. So from a sports movie aspect, this is, you know, but it really is like, it's a call back to that. Maybe when they weren't fresh, but you know, it's a call back to Rocky in a lot of ways. It which is to say, it gets back in touch with the working class aspect of it, and just the way the world sort of piles on people, and I like that. I like the mix of stuff. It's pretty cool.
Well, Halle Berry has been one who has spoken at great length about, you know, especially after her Academy Award, she wasn't offered the types of movies she expected, kind of thought she deserved to be offered, especially as an Academy Award winner. And that, you know, as the years have gone on, she's certainly taken the route of, well, screw it. I'm going to tell the stories that I want to tell. I'm going to make the movies that I want to make. And if that means that I have to make them, then so be it. So, so clearly,
it's a little tough. She's always been really good. Monsters Ball, she's extraordinary. That was a well-earned Oscar. But right after that came, you know, the Bond film, and then
Catwoman, and that
a lot of those deals were already in the works before she was given the statue. But it really did feel like somebody sort of squandering that goodwill on big fat Hollywood garbage.
Yeah,
and they, you know, it just shows you, especially if you're a woman, but the guys go through this too. Look at the 5 movies, you know, that F. Murray Abraham did after he won the Oscar.
Yeah,
you know, the world gets sick of you really, really fast. It's one of those sad things. It's a really sad thing, and sometimes you just go away, and sometimes you kind of keep fighting and make your own way. She's definitely following the latter path.
Yeah.
You know, it's a tough role. She's a little too old to play this woman, I think, but Halle's so physically in tune with what she does on screen. She really is that kind of actor.
Yeah.
Even if it's even in the quiet dramatic moments or in the big boxing moments, like both. She said, I'm, you know, I don't mean to bring me into this because I'm not Halle Berry's league or anything, but I just always admire somebody who has that thing where you're acting with all of it. You know, it's not just here. It is here, but it's everywhere. It's such a cool thing to witness. It's a special shout out. I can't remember the actor's name. I saw her in a couple of things though during movie's the woman who plays her new trainer.
Is her new trainer Angel McQueen? Is it Adrienne Lennox?
I don't know.
There's Sheila Atim who plays Budokan.
Sheila, that's who it is. Sheila Atim.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. You're good. You impressed me in a couple of films, and I don't remember seeing you in much. So good job. It's a great role in this. Again, it's just the other ultimate fighting movie which I really enjoy. I really think is one of the best sports movies of all time is The Warrior with Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy.
Yes,
and that's the same thing. It's people don't. Cool thing about ultimate fighting is that people don't get into that. It's just not a life of privilege, you know what I mean? Even when you're really good at it, there's something about that I don't know if it makes for great sport. If I'm being honest, I'd have to look more into it. It feels dubious in both films, but it makes for great human drama because it brings all this sort of working class stuff with it. The metaphor for what fighting is so right there on the surface, and I enjoy that. I like it. I mean, I like that. I think that's cool. I don't need to dig so deep for the meaning of the thing all the time, but I like nevertheless that there's extra meaning in it, and that makes it powerful. So I like it.
Okay.
Well,
America,
a lot of sports movies cliches in it. So.
Sure. I'm curious to see what you thought of America's sweetheart, Sandra Bullock, playing someone getting out of a prison for a violent crime I just can't imagine, even if someone like Sandra Bullock committed a violent crime, you'd go, it's okay. You served your time. We forgive you. But apparently in the movie Unforgivable, she's whoops, sorry Siri, nope, we're not going to look you up, Siri. I already looked you up. But Siri's a woman in this Sandra Bullock plays a woman released from prison after serving her sentence for a violent crime, and as she reenters society, and society refuses to forgive her past.
Yeah, no kidding. I loved Unforgivable, and the reason I loved it most of all was that central performance. I liked the complicated story. This story feels like there's no escape for this person. Even the people who are nice to her can't quite cope with any of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to go through the nuts and bolts of what the story is. I could just say that it's a survival movie again, and life is so harsh, and forgiveness is especially these days, it's so not on the table. It's just not on the table for you.
Right.
Don't F up too bad, because this is not a forgiving society. We're not a forgiving world. All of our great religions of the world basically preach that first and foremost in many ways and in many cases, and we just don't. We're getting worse at that.
Yeah.
And this film shows that there's no place for you here. And yet, what are you going to do? You're just going to lay down and die? You're just going to kill yourself? Well, maybe that's an option, but sometimes it feels like the only option, and it's just so brutal. The crime that she went to prison for is brutal and horrible. The emotional consequences that have stemmed from it are really powerful. Her need to sort of, again, to fight back, and yet to be carrying all this guilt around. Mm-hmm. It's just, that's complicated stuff. And I really, really liked it. It's formatted, and it's what's even better about it. It's got all that in it. And it's a film that moves along with a lot of great conventional tension and energy. So it really has this structure of this kind of old school thriller or old school suspense film, I guess we'll say, is maybe more accurate. So it's imminently watchable. It's got a big movie star in it doing her best work ever, pretty much. I mean, it's good as Sandra's ever going to be in anything, because the role is just worthy of her. It's not Gravity like flashy in terms of you could just say, oh wow, there's a performance, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she's just so strong in it, you know. And who directed it? We should give her a shout out because of the category.
It is
somebody I'm not super familiar with, I don't think.
Yeah, come on, where are you? Nora Fingscheid.
Okay.
Nora Fingscheid.
So maybe it'd have been better, Nora, if we didn't mention you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad, Nora. You know, but it's just you're from Braunschweig, Lower Saxony, Germany, and so it's good. Nora Fingscheid. I'm gonna go Fingscheid.
It's a really, really strong. Like I said, if the job of the director is to juggle all those deep meanings along with the more mercenary concerns of pacing and entertainment, like this was, I just thought this was a really, really strong movie. Again, it wasn't going to be nominated for a bunch of Oscars or anything like that. It's not that kind of movie, but it's one of those where when you're searching through streaming and streaming's telling you to watch it because it's got Sandra Bullock in it and because you liked The Blind Side or something. And you know, a fan of The Blind Side could jump into this just as much as a fan of, like, you know, whatever. What was the first movie on our list? The World to Come.
The World to Come, yeah.
And they can both get something out of this that's extraordinary. I think that is quite an accomplishment for everybody involved. So I like the Unforgivable a lot. That's
and
not
also
one to skip.
Yeah, I mean, this is literally Nora Fingscheid's as a director. She's directed short films and documentary shorts and a documentary. Looks like her only other like feature film that she's directed is a film that she wrote called System Crasher a couple years ago. So for this to essentially be, and that looks like a German language film here, if I'm that looks it's a German language film here. So this is, you know, her first quite a find for these producers and stuff to do a movie like this.
Yeah, to put something like this in her hands. Yeah, well, and like I said, whoever wrote it, the script is really, really strong as well. And and you have a movie star who is just it's a dark film, so I don't want to get into, but her enthusiasm for the material is obvious, and to get to play a character with this much complexity and this much going on behind her eyes. And, you know, I'm not a huge Sandra Bullock fan, because for every good performance of her, there's this one that's just, what's the one they kept advertising during the Super Bowl with Channing Tatum, you know?
Yeah.
That looks fun, actually, if I'm being honest, but it's not acting as I appreciate it. So what am I going to do with a thing like that? And she's in a lot of those throughout the years, but this is something else. This is something else entirely. And she just shows you she's got it. She can do it as good as anybody.
Yeah. For every Unforgivable, she's going to have an All About Steve somewhere in there.
That's sort of the game, I think, for when you get to a certain level of stardom and they're paying you 15 million, 20 million bucks per project. I mean, I got to do one of these so that I can do one of those.
Well, yeah, that's the famous George Clooney method that he tells tells everybody. He's like, do one for them and then you do one for you.
Unfortunately, Clooney dramatically misjudged what doing one for us meant somewhere along the way. Comparatively, Sandra Bullock's, she's keeping the balance pretty good. She's keeping up the juggling act.
She's
because Clooney's like, Clooney, do you really think that one was for us? You're mistaken. You haven't done you might think you have. Well, but you haven't done a movie for us for over a decade, truly.
Sure, and that to be fair, maybe that's how he.
Well, that's just
he was coming up, as he was maybe that's what he thought he was going to have to do or whatever. And then he realized, oh, wait, no, I'm George Clooney. I'm just going to go to my villa in
who
Spain
that philosophy is originally. And of course, this could go back forever. I don't know.
Sure.
But who that's originally sort of origined with in the modern era is Clint Eastwood. And if you look at the films that he's directed and starred in, you really will see, especially from the late 70s till about the early 90s, it sort of changed after that. But you really do see literally every other movie for, you see him do The Rookie, and he did it just so that he could make White Hunter, Black Heart, which nobody wanted to let him make. And so he's making these deals all along. Well, I'll do Pink Cadillac, but you got to let me do this. And Warner's like they're crunching the numbers, and they're like, okay, cool.
We'll let you do this movie if you do two movies with an orangutan.
Exactly. And Soderbergh definitely subscribed to that too. The Ocean's films were meant to be these money-making, crowd-pleasing films that allowed him to do more tricky material in between.
Right.
But again, the Ocean films didn't help anybody except those rich assholes who starred in the Ocean films. Those films are transparently terrible. They're just got people in Italy partying and thinking we'll enjoy watching it, and they're awful. I mean, the first one has some redeeming qualities. It's a little stricter of a thing, of a remake of an older film, but the sequels are just shamefully bad, and everyone should be ashamed to be involved in them, except Matt Damon.
All right,
Matt Damon, the only one who showed up for each Ocean's movie, was like, I'm going to do the work of this movie. I don't know what the hell any of these other people are doing, but it's not like he could exactly be super critical of them.
Right.
But he's like Brad Pitt, George Clooney, they're taking a vacation. That's not doing one for us.
Yeah.
Bastards.
All right, let's move on before we get too sidetracked by crappy movies.
Chandra did this one for her, and it worked out for everybody. There's the lesson. Okay,
there you go.
Bring it back around to Unforgivable.
There you go. All right, job. Next up is a fascinating movie called Passing, directed by Rebecca Hall, who is best known as an actor. But a story that she that's very close to her heart, very close to her life, and so she its Passing is it follows the unexpected reunion of two high school friends whose renewed acquaintance ignites a mutual obsession that threatens both of their carefully constructed realities.
Yeah, two high school friends from like the 20s or something.
Yeah, it takes place in the 20s. Yeah.
When I read that description, I thought, wow, that's weird. But when you get that it's a period thing, that this is the Depression era, this is a
certainly pre-civil rights era.
Pre-civil rights, thank you. That's the term I'm looking for. Very much pre-civil rights. Ruth Negga plays a young woman who is a person of color who can pass as a white woman, marries a white man. Her whole life is essentially a performance. Mm-hmm. And she bumps into this person that she went to high school with, played by Tessa Thompson, who could not pass for a white woman.
Yeah.
But it's weird. It's Thompson's story, even though Tessa, she just blew my mind in this. I am not a Tessa Thompson fan. Roll the tape back. You'll just hear me going, whatever, whatevs.
Yep. Well,
whatever.
To be fair,
you look really cool, Tessa, in those tight pants. Good job.
Yeah,
you look really cool in the shades. Whatever. You look really cool with the weird Valkyrian headdress on. Fine, good job. Like, I'm just not impressed with her. Not that she's bad. She's as good as anybody doing roles like that. But just one cooler than you performance after another, and it's getting really old for me because I'm like that. Here's an actor who doesn't let me in on anything. Well, this is the same. It's the same kind of performance. She doesn't let us in at all. She keeps it all to herself. It's all internalized. So where does all that energy go? It goes into the performance somehow in this wonderful, just magical way. Mm-hmm. It's not a magical movie. It's not a show-offy part. It's the lesser show-offy part of the two. But I always gravitate to those people in that performance because they're the ones that this story is happening to. Ruth starts her character gets sort of wrapped up very dangerously because of this chance meeting these two have back in this old culture that she was a part of, and she wants to be a part of it, but she's a con artist essentially. Her own husband thinks she's a white person. She just can't be effing around like that.
Yeah.
Even when she introduces Tessa to her husband, he thinks she's white. Like, he just isn't seeing what's going on right in front of his eyes.
Right.
And he makes, extremely sort of nonchalantly, but super racist comments, that were totally acceptable in polite society at the time. It's a delicate little movie. It's got really, really great performances, really outstanding production design. I believe this is one of the several films last year that was shot in Academy ratio. So square, like an old movie, like Wizard of Oz or like Casablanca. That helps put it back in that time period, I think, which is probably why Rebecca made that choice.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, because
passing is in black and white too, which of course is perfect. That obviously and white. That, another thing that thematically ties into it. So the director, first-time director, is pulling out all the stops, but what is allowed to be in the film without forcing anything is this just incredible emotional journey that I would have no chance of feeling these things or experiencing these ideas without Tessa's character to guide me through them. As this old white guy was never. If I'm gonna experience anything like what happens in this movie, it's because of this movie. Or is it based on a play, or is it based on
a novel? Based on a novel. By shoot, I just had it here. Nella Larson's book called Passing.
Just a really powerful film, and not nothing against World to Come, but this film really does. It really goes out on the plank on its own without the voiceover, without any help, and brings the thing home. And in a way, sometimes that makes it feel weird. Sometimes the danger is that things will feel unearned if they're not really properly explained to you. Some people watching this might have that experience. I sympathize. I didn't. Because of the artistic flourishes on display here, I was just tied to the thing visually. And because of that, the emotional impact was just full on. And I cannot say enough about Tessa in this. Such a good job. Bravo.
Yeah. I mean, Rebecca Hall, and you might wonder, you have a white woman, a white presenting woman directing this film, a British woman. But that was the whole inspiration behind this is Rebecca Hall.
She's somebody's kid. She's famous.
Rebecca Hall?
Yeah, I can't remember who her parents are, but at least one of them is famous.
Sure, I don't. Let's see. Daughter of Peter Hall, stage director and founder of the RSC, and Maria Ewing, an opera singer. But Rebecca recently learned that her grandfather was a man who passed as white. And so that is why she has recently found out that she is, a quarter African American, and so
African
she
Britain or whatever.
No, this one says no, because it's her mother. Her mother is of Dutch and African American origin. So
you can feel that personal connection to the material.
Yeah,
so it's a tough story.
It's wild.
It's not easily satisfying story, but I was very, very grateful for the journey. But from, like I say, everybody, Ruth's always good. You would expect her to be rock in this more flamboyant of the two performances, and she does. You would expect a first time director, male, female, whatever their ethnic makeup to be. They do one of two things. They either get behind the camera, some big commercial piece of crap, the likes of which they've always been in, or they really just go for it. Academy ratio, black and white, period,
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like it's just very artsy fartsy film, but in just all the best ways, because
Sure.
the things that are most important are let to be and are fully realized. And we're coming to another movie that same, like really,
Yeah.
really achieved a lot with very little.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry
also,
if you had a built-in transition.
No. I was just going to mention, I learned more about this on Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates on PBS. It's sort of a genealogy show on PBS, and
I'm adopted,
and she.
I don't take to shows like that, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, she, as you say, that's what this movie's about. It really is about that. So that being part of her history is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
I'm adopted. I just started in 1972. I have no history. I'm not going to be on some show. And as a result, I view identity a little differently, I think, than people who are more tied to those sorts of things.
Sure. All right. So next up is
I'll save that for my directorial debut, though. Hey, Rebecca, all of you guys, that was a good one. Passing is really, really strong.
So we have Maggie Gyllenhaal with her directorial debut in movie with, and to do your directorial debut and to get to direct Olivia Colman, not a bad way to start. But it's called The Lost Daughter. A woman's beach vacation takes a dark turn when she begins to confront the troubles of her past.
Oh, again, I loved Lost Daughter. This is a film that it is going to, and has, I've already seen some of the reaction. It's going to turn people off for how just emotionally standoffish it is, and how impenetrable our main character is. Usually when you've got a main character that you spend all this time flashing back to her past and stuff, it usually reveals the answers. You know what I mean? It's saying something about why they're doing what they're doing, or why what's happening to them is happening to them. And this film, it's never just, I mean, maybe people will relate to this that are different than me. It's possible, and be like, oh, I'm connecting with what's going on with her. I think the beauty of Lost Daughter is it works either way. Your inability to understand her is sort of the magic of the thing. You know what I mean? Because life isn't like that. You can't draw all these nice, simple lines to things. It isn't, this happened, therefore this happened. Life isn't as simple as that.
Sure.
Ever. So it's psychologically complex film whose secrets don't really get revealed to you, and whose relationships are strained and can't be counted on. But we feel this character's frustration, and we sort of feel her judgment, and the film, it isn't cheating. That one of the other characters in the film, played by Dakota Johnson, literally says, "What are you doing? Why?" Just calls our hero out. And she's like, I don't know. That's not conventionally satisfying in a cinema sense, but the film's really artfully done. It's very compelling. I mean, I even someone who doesn't like it or won't enjoy where it ends up, I don't know how you can't be. I don't know how a normal cinema goer could not be tugged along with this one, because each successive thing that happens is, even if it's not easily understandable, it's so compelling. If I had any issue with it, you got two people, both in the past and the present, playing the same character. They're both best actors they could have got, really. And you can see their similarities, but they're not the same. Their approach to the character is not the same. Physically, they're not the same enough. That is a leap that's a very theatrical thing that's a little hard to take. I don't think you can. I mean, Olivia's almost young enough where she just play herself as a younger person. Maybe the point is that they're different people. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's for a longer, like, over coffee discussion, and not we're trying to review 12 movies in a podcast discussion. But you know what I mean? I didn't hate that, but I was like that's another thing that takes me a step away from this person, and I can see how that would be frustrating for any audience member, really. But I thought Lost Daughter was super accomplished. I was riveted by it. You know, all these films on this list, even the worst of them is probably Bruised, and it was fantastic. So these films, from the points of view of these complicated women, just gloriously complicated. That's so nice to see for a change. I mean, we've had those stories in the past, but here's a whole group of them all came out around the same time, and really, really strong. And this is probably the strongest of them, because it's uncompromising in this wonderful way. And Olivia is the perfect person to play this lady. It's hard to imagine. It's whenever you can watch something and go, well, you know, because I can watch, like, talking about Sandra Bullock, I could have seen Hilary Swank or something could have played that character, and it might have been just as good. Not that Sandra's not fantastic in it, but I'm just saying it's hard to imagine anybody that they could have found, really both of these actors that they have playing the lead character, who was brave enough to be so obtuse on screen, and yet to have enough inner life within them that you buy into it anyway. That's just not an easy thing to pull off, and it's totally the job here.
Yeah.
And like I said, contrasted with I hate to make you do this with her Eastern European name, but the woman who plays the head of this vacationing family, and I already said Dakota Johnson,
Dagmara Dominchik.
Yeah,
Dominchik.
I love her. I love her going way back to, as silly a thing as it is, going way back to. She had a guest appearance on an old Law and Order SVU where she played this Interpol person in charge of slavery, basically sex slavery. That was really powerful and made me go, who is that? Wow. And she played the lady, you know, our damsel, basically, in Kevin Reynolds' version of
Count of Monte
Cristo, and she's fantastic in that. And the best role in the best scene for her in Count of Monte Cristo got cut for pacing reasons. I like Kevin Reynolds. I like the guy who wrote it, but I wanted to climb into the screen and just slap them silly for cutting this scene, because that scene is everything, and she's fantastic in it and deserves more. And she's got a recurring role on. Not a huge one, but a significant one on what's the show everybody's so into now on HBO with Brian Cox and
Succession.
Yeah, Succession. She's a really good actor. She's been in tons of dogs, frankly, because, you know, she's not a super famous person. She's not a movie star. So I just want to give her a shout out as being awesome.
Very cool.
She said this thing. She said this, you know, most people who know me know that I'm married to Patrick Wilson. Maybe some of the people who know me know that I'm actually an actor myself. But what she's really into is she's an artist, and that's like the third thing that nobody knows about her. And I always thought that was kind of a neat deal. So that's a good actor. Dakota's great. They're very, very American. And Olivia's very, very British. And there's something there too that's very this scene where she's going on, the whole movie is as you're going on this vacation, and she's sitting on the beach. She's had half a day on the beach to unwind and unload. And this obnoxious, like, half Italian, half American family it's on this empty beach, just show up and are the life of the party. And they just take over everything, make tons of noise. And you can, even if you're more like that family than you are like her, you just feel that tightening up of every nerve that you have when it happens. Right. And it leads to all kinds of wacky craziness.
All right. Well, the movie that is kind of a perfect transition between our next category here. We've had the movies featuring women directors. When now we're going to move into some movies that are musically inclined.
Women directors, that you had your own category. That sort of sucks.
No, but we wanted to. It was more of to highlight the fact that these were all very good movies that
from November to New Year's, January, these all came out for us to be able to watch, and just one after another, I was like, wow,
yeah.
So.
And our next movie here, as we go into our musically inclined category, is also directed by a woman. I'm gonna butcher it, but it's a Welsh name, so I think it's Sharn Heder. Sharn, I think that's pronounced. Anyway, but the movie is Coda. And CODA stands for Child of Deaf Adults, and
it also has a musical term that is applicable.
CODA is also the ending part of the ending section of a song. Ruby is the only hearing person in her deaf family, and when the family's fishing business is threatened, Ruby finds herself torn between pursuing her love of music by wanting to go to Berklee College of Music and her fear of abandoning her parents.
It's such a beautiful idea, like before the movie even starts, that you have a hearing person in a deaf family whose true passion and talent is music, something none of her that her brother and her parents cannot experience I shouldn't say in no way whatsoever, but not in any way the way she experiences it.
Mm-hmm.
And so already you got a movie about a teenage girl and her parents and her brother, and there's enough there already. Anyone who's been a part of that makeup just knows that, there's already enough disconnection and competition and all that stuff that's there. She's been the ambassador to these people, to the hearing world for her whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a binary choice. That's the glory of this film, other than that the music in it is it just takes your breath away. I'm not going to ruin the final
Mm-hmm.
moments of the movie, but all I can say is, when that was happening, I was like, I wish I had a life worthy of having this be the thing to underscore it until I die. That was the literal thought that I had in my head when I was listening to it. I'm such a musical person, and I was so incredibly moved and uplifted by it. And the film's no different. The deaf family is amazing. It's a remake of a Great Britain film that cast basically hearing people as deaf people. That was the big knock on it. It is a really good film, just like this is. This film corrects that mistake very carefully, with most of the same people making it. It's one of those remakes where it's everybody remaking it again in America, but this time with Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And it's extraordinary. I had never seen, we all seen Marlee Matlin and stuff since the Children of a Lesser God in 85 or whatever it was. She's extraordinary and brings a veteran presence to this ensemble cast that's in this thing. But she's smart enough to know, like we talked about earlier, she knows that this isn't her movie. To some degree, she's a foil for this young girl who's trying to find her way. And the performance sort of reflects that. And the guy who plays her father, Rob Dunkelberger, who saw this, he was just totally taken with this dude.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really, really extraordinary because of the authenticity of it all, It's
and let's give him a shout out because he's nominated for an Academy Award. But we're gonna learn more about him hopefully we'll see him and continue to see him in mainstream films. Troy Kutzer.
I think we will. Still a challenge. What do you do with a deaf person?
Mm-hmm.
How do you put him in the next Tom Clancy movie? You can, and you should, but you have to have the imagination to ask yourself that question from the get-go. That's on Hollywood now. You've seen this guy; he can't be denied. What are you going to do with him? It's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a challenge, but I hope they rise to that challenge because he's capable of a lot of great stuff. He's certainly capable of being a deaf character in a movie who isn't just there because he's deaf.
Right.
but
Right.
we're going to have to accommodate that. It's
Yeah,
no different than any. Who's the kid who hijacks the big boat and with Tom Hanks and I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but there's an example.
Oh, you mean from Captain Phillips?
Yeah.
Abdi, because he's one of us. He's Minnesotan.
Yeah. But if you're going to put him in a movie, you got to, he's not just somebody where you're like, oh, part. Place for him in your film.
Yeah. Barkhad Abdi is just who we're, Barkhad.
This isn't the same, but it's similar. You're going to have to manufacture opportunities for this guy. Yep. And I hope you do, because he's awesome.
Yeah, he has signed on to be in another movie called The Flash Before the Bang, and where he will be playing the coach of a deaf track team. So he'll be the deaf.
Well, he should be a given for those types of roles.
Sure. Yeah, he should. He'll be the Marley Matlin, where literally
straight to the top of the list for that kind of part.
Because for a while there, Marley, she had to fight for to make roles that weren't traditionally written for deaf actors. But for a long time it was just like, oh, we need a deaf person to fulfill this plot line of a deaf person. We get Marley.
Marley won the Oscar. I don't know that he's gonna necessarily. This is a pretty loaded year, but great. Yep. Yes.
All right.
Coda, just getting back to this teenager's love of music. That is really what it's about. Her struggle, the fact that all these forces are against her heart, is real. It's a family movie. It is relatively uplifting, not to spoil it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's complicated and glorious, and I love it. And not everyone has Apple TV, and you can't really watch it any other way, which is sort of a bummer. Right. But if you have this film at your disposal and you haven't checked it out, I can't recommend it enough. It's fantastic.
Very cool.
Not really a musical. Not
really a musical, but
women, but kind of both. A little bit of both.
Kind of both. A little bit music. It's all right. Next up is I mean, it's a movie that I had one of the best times watching. This is a movie that was really just felt wonderful to watch. In the Heights. Based on Lin-Manuel Miranda's other musical, his first musical, directed by John Chu, starring Anthony Ramos and who else was in it? Melissa Barrera. And
first of all, this just Lin-Manuel Miranda, his voice that all these characters, for better or worse, all these characters sing with. Like Hamilton, there's not a ton, even though he can work seemingly in any form musically, there's not a ton of musical variety to this. This all really feels like it's coming from the same place. That's not uncommon for composers, but
and that and this was one of his first fully realized musicals. I think he was speaking to a particular area of New York. And that
but the songs are just like Hamilton. The songs are so strong and so powerful, and the musical voice is so self-assured. That can both projects. Even this, not for me to criticize but they both have that. This is a lot of the same stuff over and over and over and over again feel to them, without a doubt. That gets a little tiring in this. They cut a bunch of songs out of this. I think at a night on Broadway, you've got a sort of bit of different expectation. This is still a pretty long movie with a big ensemble cast that is really spread out, whose stories you only tangentially are connected to at any given time. So, again, I think on stage that works probably better than it does in film, but from the filmmaking here is really strong. Like this stuff, like for a modern musical where the vast majority of the movie is just singing and musical numbers. It's really, really outstanding. So I really liked that aspect of it. I loved the again, I loved how cinematic they made this very stagey styled thing into. I just don't know how he could have done better with that. And Miranda's songs are great. This young cast is full of energy. Like you said, you had a lot of fun with it. I didn't have as much fun per se. I found it was a little bit more of a chore for me, but I still really, really admired it when it was over and was grateful for watching it. It didn't have a huge audience. There's a whole political side story that goes with it. We'll just skip that. I don't know that Jill and I have anything to add to that.
If you want to know more about that, Gordon talks about that a little bit in his review. Remember Gordon from a couple of episodes ago.
Really, he goes into it, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that one's one of his more lengthy ones.
When somebody who is the master and creator of such an incredibly diverse and amazing thing has to go to the world and apologize for not quite being diverse enough, the people he's apologizing for have completely taken their eye off the ball.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that was a weird, shameful moment that I hated. But other than that, this movie's joy. That's what it's meant to be. It's just, it has its ups and downs, but it is a celebration, and you feel that by the time it's over. So right. I quite liked it.
Next up is a movie with Adam Driver, Marion Cotillard, and Simon Helberg called Annette.
Yeah, and what this movie really has that we talked about before, way back, same series, but way back in our first year in review episode of 6, it has the Sparks Brothers. And the Sparks Brothers are insane, and so is Annette.
Yeah,
it's crazy, and it made lots of people angry, and I get why, because again, here's your stars, here's a couple of songs, wow, these songs are great, and here's a movie that's just like, what, like the whole thing is and even though it's like really well crafted and kind of amazing, there's this scene at the end, a father and daughter scene, we'll call it, all set to music that just sort of blows your mind. But the film isn't anything. We can't even really be meant to relate to it, Joel. Right? Is there such a thing as an international opera star anymore? Like when I hear that, I think of Josh Groban, and that doesn't count, does it?
Right. No, not really.
When does opera cross over into the mainstream? When does avant-garde?
The last time we at least that has crossed over into the American
Andrea
Bocelli would be Andrea Bocelli. Yeah.
But in a very limited adult contemporary old white person way did Andrea Bocelli hit the big time. Yeah. So you're starting with these premises of this world that isn't our own, and these people who don't inhabit it, and these crimes that make no sense, and maybe sometimes crimes don't make any sense, but again, it's the piling on of absurdity. And I get it. What should we have expected as a musical or a movie from these guys? You know, they tell you right in the opening number. They don't come out and say, I'm paraphrasing, but this is all effed up. Ready. Buckle up,
Buckle up, yep.
It's like, so as weird, ornate theater of the absurd, I was towed along okay. But this film didn't, I read online, and I envy these people about how they felt this and felt that. And I'm like, this movie didn't make me feel much except awe and bewilderment, in equal measure. That's not nothing. That's still feelings. It still provoked an emotional response. But Annette is weird, guys. You just got to accept that. The music is pretty weird. The story is strange. It's just strange. It just is. And there's no effort, the likes of which, like something like which we're not going to review this year, but House of Gucci like bends over backwards to, if not make you relate to something, to make you comprehend it. And this film just doesn't. It's not that it's trying to be incomprehensible. It's that it doesn't really care if you comprehend it or not. This is what it is, and you just have to deal with it. And your ability to deal with it on its own terms will go a long way towards deciding whether you're able to enjoy it or not.
All right, next up, we're going to go back to Lin-Manuel Miranda, but this time it is not one of his musicals, but he is directing this movie version of the musical, which is sort of a biopic of Jonathan Larson, the creator of Rent. But it's called Tick, Tick, Boom.
It's a real work of genius and how it takes those two things and makes it all happen. It takes this musical of his, one of the only one. I mean, Jonathan Larson's life was tragically cut short by doctors failing to see a baseball-sized tumor on an X-ray that we can all see with our own eyes. It's so frustrating when you see it. It's like, how did you miss that? I don't even know. Like not ordering an MRI or an X-ray in the first place, I can see, but to have done it, looked right at it, and not seen that tumor, I don't understand. Yeah. Anyway, Jonathan Larson, most famous for writing the Pulitzer Prize winning Rent, and Lin-Manuel Miranda was famous for a bunch of things, but is most famous for writing the Pulitzer Prize winning, what's it called again? Alexander? No.
What?
What's that dude's
Hamilton?
name? Hamilton.
Thanks. Yeah, Hamilton.
That's a better title. Yes. Anyway, there's a kinship here, even though these guys didn't know each other.
Yeah.
You know, there's a real vivid connection that this film brings across. And Jonathan Larson's songs, you know, I'd never heard any songs from Tick, Tick, Boom. I grew up with Rent. Joel and I were sort of talking. I mean, you Gen Zers and stuff who got to have Hamilton, you know, you don't know how lucky you have it. We had Rent, you know, but Rent is really, really good. I mean, I remember when it came out, it was really, really good. It's got some cheesy crap in it. So does Tick, Tick, Boom. It's very over the top. It's very old school, over the top musical theater-y in ways that, you know, that you are the things that normal people hate about musical theater.
Right. Yeah.
They don't so much mind sitting there watching a great song being performed for them. It's the stuff in between where it's just like, you know, that's the stuff that sort of takes a normal person out of it. This has got some of that in it, but I just had never heard these songs before, and I found them all amazing. I found Lynn's connection with Jonathan's story amazing. I found his ability to co-opt these tunes from this different project and put them in a musical about Jonathan's life story ingenious. And I just think, and I thought Andrew Garfield was just Errol Flynn, just out there bravery, you know, like just so brave a performance. Yeah, like I was so super impressed.
With
really, his openness and his hugeness. And his emotional commitment and his voice, my God, it's so good.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is. It's this, I mean, and look, and he shares the screen a lot of times with some big time Broadway heavy hitters. Mm-hmm. And he just has this lightness
most of the time. The only time he really doesn't is when he's alone on screen, which he is for a good deal of it, but they're all heavy hitters in this thing.
But he just has this airiness, this I mean, I can't describe it any better than you with this freedom.
I don't know Jonathan Larson personally. I do know a little bit of Andrew Garfield from watching him throughout the years, you know, so in a way this isn't a surprising thing, but it really is a place where performer meets material in a miraculous way. And 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 again, the filmmaking is a much, much more modest and much easier film to pull off than In the Heights was. But for a first-time filmmaker, it's full of just glorious things that I really, really loved. But it's very, very, it's a celebration of musical theater. Even though they've worked it out so that the vast majority of the songs are a person performing a song. So there's not a lot of, this is just people singing about stuff in their lives. There's a little bit of it, but there's only as much as there has to be. Otherwise, they've tried to make this so that you're seeing creation happen before your eyes. And I watched it the right time. I was in the right state of mind. I really like Jonathan's melodies so much already to begin with. So to have a whole bunch of new ones that I didn't really know the story of Tick, Tick, Boom. I certainly never seen the actual show. I was just taken aback by how great this stuff was. And so it was.
Yeah, I've only ever seen these songs out of context. I've seen songs from Tick, Tick, Boom performed. A person puts it in their cabaret act or as part of this, something.
And this
something
is
else,
pretty much out of context as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's put in a whole different context.
Yeah.
But that's part of why it's so awesome. Like it's almost feels like this is how it was meant to be. These songs were waiting for this to really be what they could be, to be all that they could be. It has that sense of celebration again, and more than that, fulfillment of a dream we don't even see fulfilled in the movie, but you just feel it kind of every step of the way. And it's really, really strong. It's if you don't like musicals, this isn't going to be the one that changes your mind at all. Right. You really probably should avoid it. If you do like musicals and you kind of couldn't grasp it, this is not an easy sell, the concept behind this. So if you didn't quite grasp what this was, I just dive right in, watch it at your soonest possible convenience. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's where this is a movie. I really do think it's specifically aimed at our generation. Like you said at the beginning, we grew up with Rent. So
Rent was the Gen X musical, truly.
Yeah. And so if you're a Gen Xer in that loves theater or has, spent time or has embraced the Broadway musical, then this is who this movie's aimed at.
Yeah.
And
of course, as
that's
Gen
also
Xers, you'll find some way to be cynical about it. And
we will. Yeah, we will. That's why I say, Rent doesn't age well. It's
it doesn't. It's such a product of its time, but it's still full of glorious melodies and incredible sentiments, and and that's what this is too. So it's great. I like it.
All right. Up next, we are going to move into a category calling Art for Art's Sake. And this next
very small category this year.
Very small one,
with respect to Passing, which truly was an Art for Art's Sake film.
Sure. But this one,
better hurry.
A movie that has been called Apex Wes Anderson, and it is the French Dispatch of the Liberty, Kansas Evening Sun.
Just right there, it's total bullshit. That's why it's in the Art for Art's Sake category. Wes Anderson, I don't know. I mean, if you like Wes Anderson, how can you not like this? Which I do. I have saying this, but it's like, how many more dials how many more like Spinal Tap numbers are there on the Wes Anderson amplifier? This is so quirky and so weird. What I like about it a little better, maybe, or why I think it's maybe a greater artistic achievement than something like Grand Budapest Hotel, or what's the Scout one where they're on the island and they run away from home?
Moonrise Kingdom.
Yeah. Why I think I like it better than that is I think that film has hints of, those films have hints of it. Certainly, they've got their own dark moments in them, but they're so, and his animated dog movie as well, they're so whimsical. And this film flips the script just a little bit. There's some real serious stuff going on in it, interpersonally and historically. And the whimsy just kind of latches onto that and won't let go. But it's a different journey than we've been used to from his previous films. And honestly, I think that's going to make people like it less. Because something like Moonrise Kingdom is meant to enchant you. And it's really just a romantic thing. So is Grand Budapest. They're these broad, sweeping stories, and they've got heroes and lovers and all this stuff. This has that too, but these heroes are weird and complicated, and we're not sure if we really agree with their philosophies or not, or why revolution breaks out in a certain spot, or what our place as reporters are in it. And in the case of this story, what is a journalist's connection to something, and how do they is their job objectivity? What is it they're supposed to be doing?
Yep.
It's
Let me give the storyline. Let me give the storyline real quick, just because it is a Wes Anderson.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think this is not a bad one. Faced with the impending dissolution of the French Dispatch, a factual weekly report on various subjects, old school editor-in-chief Arthur Howitzer Jr. assembles the creme de la creme of the magazine's loyal expatriate journalists for one final issue.
But that isn't even what it is. But that fine. That is at least.
I mean, I can give you more. I can give you more. Okay,
that's plenty. Look, it is a movie that isn't what it is. You have to. I mean, you don't have to take it on those terms because it's entertaining enough for what it is. But it's weird. It's weird and stagey and strange. And it's. I'm thinking of the scene with those guys in the bunk beds. You know, remember that scene? It's just like. It's.
I mean, I have not. I weirdly enough, as much as I love Wes Anderson, I have not seen this one yet.
If you love Wes Anderson, you're gonna love it. But you need to be warned that it's a much trickier thing to emotionally get into than his previous pieces, which I think, although strange and odd, certainly have been very easy to get into. They just have been. And it goes to show if you can't watch Grand Budapest and enjoy yourself, then you just don't like Wes Anderson.
Sure.
Give him up, because that's as enjoyable a movie as he's capable of making.
Yeah.
And this isn't. This has got a lot more going on in it. I found it very enjoyable because I just find I mean, he's such a unique voice in cinema. Yeah. He's not he's not off on the edge like Lars von Trier or some of the true crazy avant-garde artists. He makes these light human stories, truly. So, you know, they're meant to be inviting to us, but he's got such a unique cinematic voice and unconsciously and without malice, he just F you to everybody who isn't on this wavelength. I can't tell a story any differently than this, and I'm not going to try. I find that just every time I see a movie like that from somebody like him, and there's only a few, I just feel like it's so great. You know, it's all the cinema we're lacking from all the superhero films out there, all just crammed into 2 hours. Right. And so I find that a tonic for what frustrates me about modern movies. But other people are just going to find it's the dumbest thing ever that they just can't stand. And all reactions are valid, but you know,
I mean, he's definitely a, I can't say it any better than you. He has this unique voice that nobody else has. You can look at a single frame of a Wes Anderson film and go, oh yeah, that's a Wes Anderson film.
Well, and the reason it's tolerable is because you just feel he's compelled to do it this way. This is him being 100% authentic. Yeah. He's not capable of making the types of mercenary decisions we keep bringing up in this show. Sure. He just can't do it. This is it.
Well, and he is also he's also a filmmaker that isn't necessarily, he's not out to challenge you and, and make you feel like, and force you to confront and blah, blah, blah. No, he's just telling a story. He just happens to tell it his way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Power of the Dog.
Oh, this movie. Man. America, you really, really, and I don't mean to say this, and I don't get up, you hear how I just talked about Wes Anderson. I don't get up on my artistic high horse very often and tell you all how stupid you are, but you just are so stupid when it comes to this film. I've read these reviews. Well, nothing happened. It's so boring. I like Westerns, and this was really boring, and nothing ever happens, and it's unpleasant, and it's boring, and it's just like, okay, it's slow. Slow does not equal bad when it comes to cinema. And if you think it does, then you and I have nothing to talk about. You can just not talk to me about movies anymore. Slow is a pace at which some movies go. It's really as simple as that. Not all movies, not even most movies, not many movies these days, but this film is a glorious piece of cinema where something important something crucial to the inner lives of these people happen in every scene that takes place. The fact that it's shot beautifully and marvelously, and this is a filmmaker who Joel, tell you, I've hardly been a champion of this person throughout the years. I really have not. I haven't, because I don't like being condescended to by films. And I think a lot of people, okay, they maybe feel a little condescended to here, but your guttural reaction of, I must warn others from watching this because I was so disappointed by what it was. I find that, and other people's eagerness to take that warning and to wipe something off the map that they have not tried to experience for themselves. I just found the whole discourse around Power of the Dog to be miserable. And we really do try and just take these things as what they are. And we really do, Joel and I think we do this naturally, actually, but we really do try and focus on the storytelling and not get too much into the pretensions of the thing. This film's cinematography is incredible. It's incredible. But even if it didn't have that, first of all, it's not a Western. It's a James Hardy styled chamber drama that just so happens to take place in Montana. So if you really were tuning up for shootouts and stuff like that, then okay, you got screwed. Yeah. You got screwed by the cowboy hat and the poster. But there's lots of different stories you can be told where a cowboy hat is appropriate that isn't some old style Western. We'll get to one here in a bit. Which has got all the cowboy hats and all the dumb, like, fast-paced crap you could ever want from a film. This one, I don't know what to tell you. I found it so fragile and beautiful. And the exact things that people criticized about it were the exact things I loved about it. The lead character, Cumberbatch, is this weird, unapproachable, ununderstandable guy, but that's his power. You only feel his emotional reactions to things. You only feel his hate, his jealousy, and that makes him more of a metaphor than a person. But in the end, he's not that anymore. If you can no longer see him as a person, at first you only see him as a threat. You only see him from Kristen Dunst's character's perspective or Jesse Plemons' character's perspective. The fact that I hear that nothing ever happens with those characters, nothing ever happens with Kristen Dunst's character. You literally, okay, it's figurative. So I was about to use literally in a Gen X sort of non-literal figurative way. Sorry. It shows you that I'm being a little hyperbolic. All right, back on track. Figuratively, but in a very tangible way, Joel. Watch her soul break in half in this movie at this moment. And if you can't see it, then you're not looking close enough because it's there. You might say, well, I wouldn't react that way. Or why is her husband so useless? Jesse Plemons is terrible in this. He doesn't do anything. Well, that's exactly correct. Not only does he not do anything, even though he's a pretty nice guy, he's never going to do anything. Think about that for a second. Yeah. He saves the day only by his presence, and he's never going to change anything that's fundamentally wrong here. It makes somebody else have to step in and change things, or we're all on the road to ruin. And what's that decision? And when does it happen? Right. It happens on screen. It happens before your eyes. I haven't even watched this twice, and I was not without knowing what was going to happen. I was following it. And I don't think I'm a better viewer than you. I maybe watch a few more movies than you, and maybe some of you loved this. Good for you. Right. Even if you didn't love it, I call on you to stop calling it stupid. It's anything but. I call on you to let your friends and neighbors make up their own minds about it, for the love of God. I certainly say that to the people who are listening to this show. I don't remember to say it for every damn movie, Joel, but we say it a lot, don't we? You might feel differently.
Well, yeah. I mean,
you might connect with this in a way that I didn't. You know what I'm saying? I get that. I thought Power of the Dog was spectacularly good.
I mean, to listen to you talk about this, I feel a little bit like a time machine, because it feels very similar to how people reacted to The Piano. Another Jane Campion film.
people were turned off by the piano because it was obtuse, but the piano had two things that Hollywood loves. It had a character who
had Harvey Keitel's penis, right?
Okay, three things. I was going to get to Harvey's wang flapping around. That was very memorable. But the two things it had a main character who had some affliction. We all love when a Hollywood star shows up. In this case, she couldn't talk. Everybody talked about how awesome her performance was because of that. Her performance was pretty awesome, but that, and I've argued that to this day, that made it easier. Not having to talk and just live in the emotional reality in your body and your face is that's maybe not the easiest task for an actor to take on, especially in a marathon like the piano, but it's easier than having to marry someone else's words with what you think your idea of their emotions is. That's the job of acting. Holly Hunter didn't have to do that in the piano. She just flat out didn't have to do it. They didn't have to do that work, which I think is the hardest part of putting a performance together. Otherwise her performances, and it is awesome. The other thing it had this plucky kid that no one had ever seen before who shouts at the top of her lungs in every scene, all kinds of crap. And we gave that kid an Oscar as well.
It's true.
She turned out to be a relatively good actor, but we worship those sorts of things. This film doesn't have any of that. It's such a, even though the characters are all capable of speaking it, it's so much quieter and so much under the surface. I understand that, but I don't understand the hatred for it. I really don't.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I remember people having a pretty visceral reaction to going to the piano and specifically saying nothing happens. I mean, nothing really happens. It's, just like you're sitting there and all of a sudden there's Harvey Keitel's penis and you're watching this and the kid, and then what? Yeah. I don't get it.
They had the same reaction to Portrait of a Lady. They had the same reaction to all of Jane's films over the years. She's a filmmaker who tells the same story over and over and over again. We said that. It's a different setting. They're different narrative challenges, different characters, but the story in form is the same. But this is her best. It's her best movie, I think, by a long shot. And I think it's a really, really strong film. And I think people not being able to relate to it on the terms of how things work in their lives and on their phones, and that disconnect and that unwillingness to try and understand and empathize, I find it. I'm ashamed of it, truly. I hate it. So, but I love Power Dogs.
Cool. Let's tell me a little bit about The Green Knight, because I loved the trailer for The Green Knight. I have not seen it yet.
Well, how could it not make a great trailer? Because it's got so much great visual stuff in it.
Yeah. It's the medieval story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight.
This again, it's in the art for art's sake category, even though it's a fairly expensive fantasy adventure tale. It's an artistic, although the funny thing about The Green Knight is The Green Knight's been made into a movie before with Sean Connery. Anybody remember that one?
No,
nobody does, because it was barely shown here. It's horrendous. But Miles O'Keefe as Sir Gawain, and
it made people forget about Zardoz
as the Green Knight. It's very Zardoz-like, I have to say. The Green Knight is sort of Zardoz-like too, in that it is sort of impenetrable. The journey he goes on, the task he has to fulfill, the mean trick that's played on him early in the film that he then has to face the consequences for later, is weird. It's this weird pagan, absurd thing. Like if you just go back and study what the actual story is, it's Knights of the Round Table adjacent without question, but it's so odd, and each of his trials are so sort of strange and mystical, and the whole thing is like a weird medieval drug trip that you go on with him, full of hallucinations, full of spirits that behave strangely, full of just images and things. It's a beautiful film, which is again part of why I love it. I love how weird it is, because I know the story, and it couldn't not be weird. So I love that the film just embraces the oddness of each sequence. Like every telling of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, there's this whole second half of the second act where he shows up at this big estate and all this weird stuff happens, and that from our Western storytelling. Well, this is a Western story. It comes from ancient England, but it lets every version of this down cinematically, because I think if it were just these weird trials with these ghosts and spirits and things, like, I think you could sort of learn to cope with that by the time you got to the ending. But the film, then the story doesn't have a big ending. It's got a weird ending that's hard to explain, and hard to kind of wrap your brain around. And worse, it has this whole sort of strange, otherworldly soap opera that has to play out before you can get there. I think those two things are always tough. But this is as good a telling as that story as you're ever going to see. It's such self-assured filmmaking, and Dev Patel's so good in this, in the main role as this guy who's, from the word go, is so completely in over his head with everything he encounters, and the lesson that he has to learn almost from a muscle memory standpoint, because his intellect is incapable of learning it. He has to be bludgeoned into learning it. That's really what the story is about. It's awesome. Like, they don't make them like this for a reason, because a lot of people saw this. It's got terrible, terrible user reviews on it, despite critics liking it. I'm a critic who loved it, but your mileage is going to vary. I feel like this movie made a lot of money, at least. It was a big hit. So the filmmaker's next film is going to be something. So I don't feel like I quite have to advocate for it like I do Power of the Dog, which is just universally hated by people who should know better. I think a lot of people liked this for what it was. I mean, we've seen that, we've been exposed to the Disney versions of these old legends so much so that we don't realize the real weird, absurd horror that is part of the actual tales. The Brothers Grimm tales, the King Arthur legends, Beowulf. I mean, you really look at what these things are. They're weird, and there's a lesson in them, but it isn't one. It's one that if we were all eager to learn, it wouldn't be there. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be necessary. And so I dig it for that reason. Very, very much so, in fact.
Very cool.
So I liked all three of these movies a lot.
I have a feeling I'm going to like it. It's
not fair that the movie studios, what's Lionsgate going to do? It's super weird. Be careful. You might not want to watch it. I mean, that's not how they're going to sell it. So they're forced to sell it for its visual splendor and the fact that it's this weird fantasy. I get that, but now you've heard our little review. I haven't spoiled a single second of it for you. So, but you at least, hopefully going into it prepared, you might enjoy it. I think that's worthy, basically.
Right. All right, let's move on. So, I mean, I think as you chart the trajectory of storytelling by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, I think the natural,
which we're kind of forced to do in our generation, aren't we?
Yeah, the natural progression does lead from Good Will Hunting to a movie about a medieval duel. And this one is called The Last Duel. It's Ridley Scott's The Last Duel. King Charles VI declares that Knight Jean de Carouge settled his dispute with his squire by challenging him to a duel.
The duel had something to sell. I get that this is a spoiler in and of itself, so spoiler alert for The Last Duel. I really do think this came out in most of the discourse over it. Of course, the reality was there wasn't anywhere near. This is the start of our movies to talk about category. So we're moving on from art for art's sake. All this certainly has plenty of that in it. It's Ridley Scott. He's never made a non-glossy big commercial film, even if he's one of the more visually, innovative commercial directors. He's still totally a commercial director. And this film was supposed to reach a wide audience. It was supposed to be a big hit. It's got big movie stars in it. It's got this salacious, jealousy story of jealousy and ambition at the heart of it and all this stuff. And you're supposed to want to see that. Supposed to want to see Adam Driver and Matt Damon clash swords together over a disagreement. That sounds fun. It is to a certain degree. But the real thing that this film has is it's got these 3 40-minute or so acts told from one specific point of view. First Damon's character, then Driver's, and then Damon's character's wife. The same story told 3 times by 3 different perspectives. Why didn't the advertising tell you that that's what you're going to see? They almost hid it from you. They wanted to show how clever they were when you got to the third one and realized what you were seeing. It is revelatory when you're watching it in the film. We see lots of events that our perspective characters are only privy to from their point of view. We also see the same event happen 3 times from a different point of view and see how the details are different. So it's that's the game of the movie. And I think a lot of people still don't know that. And I think that's weird. I don't know why they didn't. That's what they should have sold. Maybe that wouldn't have sold, but that's what it is. And that's what they should have sold. In my opinion, Fox definitely tried to sell this thing, Fox being Disney now. Ridley Scott even said, this was a Fox deal that Disney had to take on. And I was expecting, because it's not a Disney-like picture, I was expecting them to blow it off, basically. And he thought they didn't. He thought they did a great job of selling it for all the excitement and stuff. And he said, it's just people. People just don't want a story like this. They don't want to engage with anything that's complicated like this. They don't want to really go through anything that's unpleasant like this. It's a deeply unpleasant film. It shows medieval times with no rose-colored glasses on whatsoever. And it shows how potent those different perspectives can be. Yeah. And it's got 3 different amazing actors. We've already said Adam Driver, Matt Damon. Who's the woman's name? Judy Comer?
Jodie Comer. Yep,
Jodie Comer. Who's the star of the thing, really? By the time it's over, it's her movie. She's amazing in it. And Ben Affleck has a very showy, kind of like his, reminds me, not so much in style, but in form, it reminds me of his role in Shakespeare in Love. And he's great. He's great. He's great at that. They're all playing French people, so the fact that they don't have English accents is nice. It's Americans playing ancient French people. That's fun. And one French person, thankfully, the lady in question. It's good, man. It's a really, really good movie that got an unfair shake, and that everybody should try again now on streaming. And the fact is, its streaming numbers are through the roof. This really was a movie that it wasn't good enough. It wasn't going to get our age to come out and watch it during COVID. It's not compelling enough to get our butts in the seats over that. It was never going to get the kids. Ridley, he might be bitter about that, but he must have known that before he even made the thing. This isn't for them. How could it be? This is a complicated adult movie with no easy payoffs. Even though it has a big duel at the end, there's no justice in it whatsoever. And so he had to know that the talk of it was going to be complicated. What they didn't guess was that no one would even talk about it because nobody had even seen it.
Right.
There were more Huffington Post like shares of the little clips from the promotional interviews than there was any real discourse about the film, and that's because
there was more talk about Matt Damon's weird mullet than there was about the film itself.
Right. Because Matt Damon has a weird mullet in medieval France. I mean, and that's what you want to focus on. It just blows my mind. I mean, it is weird. It's a weird, ugly mullet, but that's right, because that's probably what it was.
Yeah. And maybe don't you go, I wonder if there's a reason for that.
Seriously, Joan Rivers, just stick to the red carpet then. I mean, if that's all you can talk about is the hairstyle, but you're not wrong. I mean, those people were never going to be into this. So it's not even as good as it is. It was not even going to be a big awards season film, really.
Right.
So what is it? Really big, expensive failure, but it's such a noble failure that I really recommend people watch it anyway, even though it's long and super unpleasant.
Right.
It's really gross. And
all
awful,
right. All right, folks from Power of the Dog. You wanted cowboy hats? We'll give you cowboy hats with our next film. The Harder They Fall.
This is a Western. You know what's cool about this Western is that it's not a Western about African-American cowboys where the white guys are the bad guys. It's this posse of African-American law people and African-American, what do you call them? Bandits, basically. And it's based on this true life feud between these two African-American kind of stars of the Old West.
Sure. Some might even say
based on the incredible true story.
I know. You might say that for Last Duel too, but in both cases that would be a big stretch. They are based on things that actually happened, but beyond that, they're full of themselves and full of it. But that doesn't have to make for a bad movie. In this case, I think it does in the end make for a bad movie, despite Idris Elba, despite Regina King, despite Lakeith Stanfield, who's actually really good in this film, and I wish desperately he was in a different movie. This movie's just I've complained about it before, and I've admitted, and I'll admit again, it's maybe something culturally that I'm not attuned with. But the bad guys in this movie early in the film massacre the entire contents of a passenger train, and they do it as a joke. It's done as a punchline. And then at the end, they're standing in a room where everybody's dead, and they start crying over their weird connection to each other. And then they talk about their legacies and what they mean to each other. And I cannot, even in over a 2-hour period, get from point A to point B ever. I will never be able to do it. I don't want to be rigid in my thinking about this. I'm trying to adapt to this actually as this becomes more and more the style, but I just can't do it. I can't watch 5 different movies being made in these different chunks throughout the thing and be able to handle it or cope with it, or even frankly, which is what I really want to do when I'm watching a movie, just accept it for what it is. This style prevents me from doing that. And this movie is so all over the place in terms of crazy, wicked, wild melodrama, extremely terrible, ironic violence. And it makes jokes and then it gets serious and you just don't know what it is. You don't know what it's trying to be. And I hate that. That said, Lakeith Stanfield, just focus on him for a second, because I just liked his take on this guy so much. He's a gunfighter. He's probably the best ever. It's that kind of guy, but he's so weary of it all. And a good guy, he's a bad guy in the thing. He's this quiet henchman, which is a character I always sort of appeals to me. Going back to my days with Zastrozzi, Master of Discipline, there's a quiet henchman in that too that I got to play. Didn't get to do much sword fighting, but got to at least read the part, which was a part that meant a lot to me. And this guy's that guy. Like, he's more than capable of killing everybody in the room, but he kind of is, let's see if I can get away with not doing that. He's done it before, but he's just tired. And that, I love that. There's a price your soul pays. And he's not going to turn the other cheek. He's not going to turn the leaf and become a different person at this point. But I'm going to see, here's this kid, here's my other guy on the good guys, right, who's coming at me, who's also a really brilliant gunfighter. And I'm going to see, maybe I can get through this movie without killing this kid. That's the take on it. I found that fresh and wonderful, you know what I mean? And I thought that was kind of neat. It's not that I don't like Idris Elba or the guy who plays the hero in the movie. I can't remember that actor's name.
His name is Jonathan Majors.
He's a pretty good actor. You know, it's not that I don't like Regina King. It's not that the movie doesn't look pretty good or isn't exciting. It just, it was directed by a guy who's really weird. He's only directed 2 movies. They're both Westerns, Joel. I find that strange.
Yep.
They're both weird counterculture Westerns. The earlier Western has no good reviews for it. This has a ton of good reviews, but I shouldn't put words in people's mouths or try and read people's minds, but I really feel like it's a film that feels like you're supposed to like it. So you better, you know what I mean? And And I didn't. It's by a guy who has started his career out as being the musical director, sort of the music supervisor for a whole bunch of films. And it feels like that. It feels like a bunch of music videos in succession that, while they tell the same story, don't have anything else in common with one another. That said, there's enough visual flourishes and stuff on display that I wouldn't necessarily boycott his next film, but I hated this film and I wanted very much to like it. I feel like not completely, but at least to some degree on the periphery, I was the kind of person this movie was made for. Not like people come to see Westerns anymore. They don't. They flat out don't. So you've got to be kind of a movie fan to even want to get in on that level. And I feel if you're a movie fan, then, and not just somebody trying to pass the time with the latest whatever, you got a chance with that person. And this film it's totally spoiled my goodwill in a really frustrating way. Those tears at the end, man. I never felt like I wasn't mad, but I was like, all of you, come on.
Right.
How on earth was I supposed to get here with you? How? I don't know how. It's not that, you didn't earn the big moment. It's all full of big moments. It's that, this is what it is then? God, unbelievable. Like, I just felt like, no way. You shouldn't be feeling like that at the end of the film. So that's my take.
Hey, remember when we ranked and did all of the Bond movies? In an absolutely breakneck,
we thought we could do it all in one show.
We did. We tried. We
did all the Connery and Roger Moore Bonds in one show.
Yep.
Pretty impressive.
We gave it a go.
And then once we couldn't do it in one show, we're like, well, let's just take the next 9 shows to finish this thing up.
So if you ever want to spend a month or whatever, you can listen to us. But
just kidding. It's only 3 shows.
No, like the tagline says, which I believe is somewhere here on my thing. Oh my God, where is it? The tagline is, all stories have an ending or something like that. I had it here. I had it, and then it went away.
All evidence to the contrary.
IMDb. Why are you doing me like this?
You made Joel look so silly in front of all the people most important to him. I don't really care what it said anyway. So I don't know if
that was part of my. It was going to be my segue. It was going to be my thing. Anyway, we're talking about No Time to Die, the final movie in the Daniel Craig James Bond series.
Yep. And it's too late now to go back and do these differently. But the biggest weakness that the Daniel Craig Bond movies have is that they're a saga that has bent over backwards to try and have continuity, even though it's changed its mind about what it is 3 times in 5 movies. This has no choice. This is the last Daniel Craig Bond movie. You've made a saga. You have, in ways that defy proper explanation, tried to connect all this crap together that's happened in each of them. And now that the final film has to sort of be a payoff to that. And within those constraints, this is a pretty good movie. It's got some really exciting scenes in it. It really has some exciting stuff in it. Nothing that we really haven't seen before in a Bond movie, though.
Sure.
This film doesn't really manage anything new per se, but it tries to keep its focus on, and you heard me pre-complaining, dare I say, about how they were going to wipe the kind of previous movie off, because I just didn't see how you can deal with Spectre without just getting rid of it and starting fresh. I really didn't. I couldn't imagine them continuing on from the end of that film because it's so nonsensical at this point. But I was wrong. They do that. And that's not a criticism. They might have had an easier time of making a more conventionally satisfying film had they cut the cord somewhere there. But to their credit, they didn't. They take those relationships seriously. That love affair between Léa Seydoux's character and Daniel Craig that we're meant to believe in at the end of Spectre, which we only barely do if we do at all,
right,
is part of the thing that drives this movie, which is great. I mean, I love that. I love that you committed to that. I really do appreciate that, because you can't, because people like to have all their connections made and they're sort of connect the dots to be all like to show you a complete picture, but they don't. They also like to just complain bitterly and constantly about the thing they didn't like and the other thing, and they really want to erase that thing.
Yeah.
And this series has a little bit of both in it. They're mostly good movies. I think all of them to one degree or another. But this was the big ending. And we'll probably talk about it more as the show's going. I'm not really going to focus on it. I'll just say that for this iteration of this character, it has an ending. It comes to a close that might be bittersweet for some, but is as satisfying a thing as we could have expected from a character standpoint. Would I have liked a better plot? Yeah. Would I have liked the movie to be its own thing in a vacuum that I could just enjoy by itself more than I can? Yes. Would I have liked it to be half an hour shorter than it is? Probably. But at this point with these writers, and it's the same people been doing these all along, they had a couple of key things they had to pull off in No Time to Die, and they did it. They did it. And that's so good job. I mean, yeah, you did that part of it. That in and of it, that wasn't going to be easy, and they did it. So I'm impressed by it in that way. I feel like, oh boy, here we go. I just feel like, oh, here it is. It's an origin story. It's this saga. It's all the things the Bond movies aren't. They are true non sequitur standalone adventures that have their own value and they have their own internal reality, and one can be very different than another, and that's the glorious thing about them. They can take on the personality of the writers and the filmmakers that are working on them. I feel like this shows that we're not doing that anymore, and I feel like any further Bond adventures are going to do that with even a clearer roadmap or whatever. And I feel like, normally I like that, and I could like that going forward, but I feel like that's not what this series has been. And I feel like, frankly, this series hasn't really done a very good job of that as it's been attempting. That doesn't mean it hasn't accomplished some other cool things, but it just hasn't done a very good job of that. And now that that's the focus, I feel like, I don't know what you do with it. It could be tough.
All right. Well, let's talk about the other big giant movie series that had a new movie this past year. The return of the Matrix in The Matrix Resurrections.
There's a scene early on in The Matrix where this video game that what's Neo's name in The Matrix? I can't remember.
I believe Anderson. It's David Anderson.
Anyway, Mr. Anderson.
Thomas Anderson.
Thomas, thank you. There you go. That sounds right. Anyway, where Thomas Anderson's being told, hey, we're going to do a sequel to your biggest selling game ever, your video game. And he's like, well, I don't want to do a sequel. And he goes like, yeah, but we have a new parent company now and they want a sequel. And so we're going to do it. And we're either going to do it with you or without you. Decide, we want to do it with you. And you really do feel like Lana Anderson or Lana Wachowski, this is like literally a conversation.
Yeah. Oh, it is this weird meta moment where you're just like, what? Yeah. I mean, it's really, it's kind of fascinating.
Well, Matrix Resurrections, is that what it's called?
Yep.
Is a meta movie, for better or worse. Spoiler alerts, for worse. It's for a lot worse, actually. People who hated the Matrix sequels, and we liked the Matrix sequels, Joel and I particularly liked them. Not so much for what they are on the surface, but for the deeper meanings. This film is deeper meanings, and it lacks something on the surface that it needs to work. I'm not 100% sure what that is. It was supposed to have Hugo Weaving in it. That would have helped. It was never supposed to have Lawrence Fishburne in it, although he was available and willing to do it. So it needed a better reason to not have him in it than I think it provides as a film. I'm not sure what the behind the scenes stories are.
Yeah.
But if you want to go back to the Matrix, let's go back to the Matrix. You know what I mean? This film doesn't quite pull that off. For a $200 million film, it cost more than both the Matrix sequels combined. It also doesn't feel innovative or interesting or fresh or like it creates really anything new that those films did. I don't know that it's a bad film. I don't think so. I like the idea of, I like that the peg is, this is our lives. You know, this was what we were going through when we were transitioning. And I don't mean to say we, because Lily Wachowski very famously had nothing to do with this. It's the first movie that the Wachowskis haven't made together since they started making films, way back from when they just started writing screenplays in their free time. And whether, I don't know particularly what Lana or Lily bring to each project, but it feels disjointed in that. There's a disconnect in it where you feel like this is only half the thing. You know what I mean? I didn't hate it, but I was very disappointing to me because I felt like I was very dubious that this was worth doing, but like the film says, we're doing it. So at least Lana, Keanu, everybody got on board. It's not as good as the sum of its parts though. And some of its parts are just baffling and silly. And I felt bad feeling that. I felt bad watching it. Like I felt bad for it. It had my sympathy, you know. It's like, poor Matrix Resurrections. You're really trying here, and it's ain't working. This just wasn't meant to be. It wasn't supposed to be. Matrix Revolutions, love it or hate it. It's fine to hate it, but love it or hate it, it has it made its point. It made its point so beautifully, actually. With the sunrise, you know, we talk about it in our Matrix deep dives, and this movie's just like this movie's needed. This movie's point is let's make more money with the Matrix. And even though an artist really tried to tie that into something meaningful and make it good for us, they kind of weren't capable of doing it. And I feel bad for it on that level. It's a shame. I thought I told Joel, I'm like, I hate that they're doing this. We talked about it when they first made the announcement. Then the articles started coming out, and I was like, so it's a bad idea. I shouldn't do this. And then the trailer came out, and I'm like, I'm not going to watch the trailer. That can't help, you know. But then I did watch the trailer. It came up. It like was the next video that played after I watched something else, you know. Stupid YouTube. You know me too well. and I found myself like without changing the channel or without even thinking, I was just watching it. I'm like, wow, this is a cool idea for a sequel to The Matrix. I mean, this could work. Yeah. This could really be cool. And then the buzz started coming out. The actors are like, it's like nothing you've seen before. It's a really different kind of blockbuster storytelling. And I'm like, okay. And I fell into the trap of, now I'm sitting down to watch The Matrix on New Year's Eve or whenever I watched it. And I'm really excited. And just slowly, not all at once, but slowly just sinking into, you know, not worthless, but only slightly better than worthless. Like,
I mean, it was, I started getting excited for it. Once I heard an interview with Keanu Reeves, and he was like, I had no interest in coming back. And then he was like, and I'm like, and so then Lana calls me and said, hey, do you want to come do Matrix 4? And he's like, I died. What? And he's like, and she's like, let me send you the script and you'll see what, you know, you'll see how it works. And he's like, and I said, okay, but unless you figure out a way that he comes back, that I'm not gonna be like, what? And so he's like, I read it and I'm like, all right, I'm on board. You figured out a way. And so that got me excited because he was, you know, he was like, okay.
It's very meta. It really is about these outside forces experience on the Matrix. And it's hard to get over that there isn't an internal logic to it that's worth it. And that's the part that's frustrating to me, is the story isn't even what it is.
Yeah.
It's always been a feature of the Matrix films. What is reality, obviously, but the conceit didn't have enough merit to warrant another movie. The idea behind it was worthy and interesting and personal and all those things that you want something to be to make it meaningful.
Yeah.
But the story within the story is sort of nonsense and frustrating. So that's my take on it. It's my one person's take on it. Nobody liked The Matrix. Nobody saw it in the theater. It streamed pretty well, but the buzz on it is pretty bad. And it feels like it's only going to get worse as time goes on.
It does feel tacked on. It's unnecessarily tacked on.
It was always going to be tacked on. Yeah. I think even the movie admits that right at the top, which I find refreshing.
Yeah, there is that.
But it really does. It doesn't. It really does feel tacked on. It's
all right. Final movie, Ryan. Final movie
of 2001 for us. Sorry, there's a whole list of things we won't be talking about.
Yeah, there's a movie. There's a whole bunch.
Well, the cutoff for me was it streaming? Was I able to watch it before New Year's, basically?
Yeah.
And if the answer was yes, I tried to catch it. And if the answer was no,
we didn't talk about next year's show. Sorry, we didn't talk about Spencer. We didn't talk about I can't remember. I can't even
Nightmare
remember
Alley. We didn't talk about West Side Story. We didn't talk about Being Ricardo's, although I did see that. I saw that after I made the list. So whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
There's so we didn't talk about Belfast. There's a lot of films that are going to be part of the award ceremonies conversation.
So so we're just like we are aware that we didn't talk about, but this is our list. And we're going to end.
You really want another show of this anymore? Anyway, maybe you don't. Think about
it. But we are going to talk about one of the most talked about films, and just a real to me a real just kind of silly bonkers night at the movies, and that is Don't Look Up.
Yeah, I mean, we're sorry. Here we are, all about to reach our second hour of this show. Although we've had some short ones in this series, at least. Yeah. And here's the most talked about movie, and now we're going to try and talk about it real quick.
Right.
It's last on the list because of its talkability, truly, because of its newsworthiness. It really was a huge part of the American conversation for a couple of weeks.
Right.
And that's as big an impact, I think, socially that a film can make these days. Adam McKay, who is famous for making Step Brothers and Talladega Nights, like basically the more thoughtful of the Anchorman, right, of the Will Ferrell films of their day. And was pretty good at movies like that. As far as movies like that go, Anchorman, Talladega Nights, these are kind of the top tiered, in my opinion, of stupid comedies of the aughts and the teens.
Yeah.
They're still stupid comedies, but they're the kind of the best ones. And that's cool. He branched away when he made Big Short.
Big Short. Yeah.
And that movie's, again, it's the same thing. It's meant to be talked about. It's a talker. It doesn't take it does a little, but it doesn't take its own story super seriously. It keeps breaking from it. It keeps breaking down the fourth wall. It has all these gimmicks in it to tell us stuff.
Yeah.
And then the next film he did was Vice, the story of the Cheney family with Christian Bale as Dick Cheney. And that film also a skewed conventional biopic format to tell us stuff, to talk at us, to tell us everything, to tell us how we should feel by what we just saw, to tell us how we're going to feel by what we're about to see. And I didn't completely dismiss those films, but I basically hated that approach to filmmaking. I don't like being talked at. I like feeling something, going along for the ride. If you're going to tell the story of Dick Cheney, then put me in his shoes if you can, and let's see what it all means. Don't just tell me what happened. Don't keep stopping things to tell me what's happening. I just think that's completely amateur and stupid, and so I don't like it. Although it has a compelling central performance, you learn a lot about the Cheneys. Like, it's not something where you just say, "Oh, that's a piece of crap," because it's like that. Mm-hmm. This film, and I saw the trailer for this, and I'm like, well, it should be good, because here this sort of ride splits the difference. It feels like Joel said, zany night at the movies. Like you're completely divorced from reality here, which means there won't be some lesson that we have to learn or some sort of pedantic message that's going to be beat in our face. That's so oversimplistic that anybody could have it. I was proven wrong on that. Not everybody can get it, apparently, which just blows my mind, because what this movie's about is transparently obvious.
Yeah.
It's like his other films, completely condescending. It's smug in this way that makes you hate it a little, like you'd hate an annoying, obnoxious coworker. But it's also full of pretty broad laughs and some really pretty assured performances. And it's full of, and this is why I thought it might work, and I think on this level it really does work, it's full of satire that really points the finger at ourselves in some very, very key ways. Yeah. I think where this movie goes wrong is it's funny enough and it's absurd enough that it lets us off the hook by the time it's over. In fact, it gives us an almost absurdly sincere ending that when the real ending comes in a post-credit scene that I think is pretty brilliant, people were pissed because they were feeling something. And then suddenly somebody right. came up with them with a raw fish and was like, take this. And you didn't know how to react to it. But the clown, in a satire, the clown should be slapping you in the face. I mean, that's how it works. Yeah. That's the whole point of the thing. So then why did we have this wonderful, feel-good, tragic, tragicomic ending? Well, I don't know why. I don't really get it in the end. I get that the asteroid is global warming, even though her tweets, it's not about global warming, you guys. It's about an asteroid.
Yeah.
Stop taking it so seriously. Like you did not just tweet that.
No.
Adam McKay's sitting over here and he just said it's about global warming. Are you not paying attention?
It's about global warming. Yeah.
What he said is it's not about the pandemic, although wow, it really does. Sort of.
Yeah.
Like I wrote it before the pandemic, but it's really about global warming.
Uh-huh.
It's about an asteroid. It's not about you. No, it's totally about us. And it can only be judged by how it works on that level. And the way it works on that level is only about 40-ish%, although that 40% is pretty potent. And it's enjoyable. I mean, yep. I couldn't deny that. I was super annoyed by it. And because like I said, I don't like feeling like I'm being talked down to. As soon as I could understand words, the thing I hated the most in life as just a wee tot was being condescended to in an obvious way. Yeah. And I've always been the biggest dickish part of myself has always come out in those moments. I've always lashed back irrationally hard at that sort of thing. Even if it's a nice old lady giving me a cookie, don't talk to me like I'm a puppy. I'm a 3-year-old person. You know what I mean? Like I've always been angry at that. And this movie is just, it is that. It's for 2.5 hours. It's just, me. You get, okay. Yeah. It's upsetting. So, but it's also really funny. I mean, it is really funny.
Yeah.
The morning talk show stuff with Tyler Perry and what's her face is really funny.
Yeah, and Kate Blanchett.
Jonah Hill I find less funny, but I found Mark Rylance really funny in a terrifying way.
Oh my God, yeah.
He's really where the movie is at its best. It's so funny, so over the top and weird, and yet absolutely yes, this is where we're at, folks. This is the guy you're hoping saves the day. And you're fools, yep. We all are.
Yep.
I didn't think Meryl Streep was great in it, but I thought the material was beneath her. I thought the same for Jennifer Lawrence. I thought she gave it a go, but it a little easier for DiCaprio because his character's got a little more to do. But and Melanie Linsky, I really loved her. So
yeah, Melanie Linsky was great. Timothy Chalamet.
He's fun. He was really fun. His presence was very fun because to me, that actor and that character represented the best of us, because he's just this guy who comes along, but he questions just a little bit, and learns and gains some perspective. Like these other characters are just, represent a point of view, and that's all they are. I liked that we were introduced to a character who was more than that so late in the game. And it was fun that it was played by a big star. I thought that was cool. So.
Yeah.
But I didn't like it, and I'm not going to go to bat for it and sing its praises just because I agree with its central premise. Right. Adam McKay, and you look at his Los Angeles Lakers TV show that's coming on. He's a smug, condescending prick of a storyteller, and if that's all he's ever going to amount to, I'm not saying he can't be more someday, but this isn't it. If you can't do better than that, man, if you cannot connect with us on a human level without telling us what it is you think all the time, because I'm telling you, bro, you're not that clever. You aren't. You're not a bad movie maker, but you're a shit storyteller. And I challenge you to marry the two things together at some point, to at least try and see what you can accomplish, because world's your oyster now. Don't Look Up was, I mean, to me, that's the movie of the year. You can give whatever you want to the Oscar, but that was the thing. I mean, that was the thing, even more than Spider-Man, even more than some of this other stuff, where we would just all Don't Look Up for a big chunk of a big news cycle.
Yeah. And it was the type of thing that you're like, did you watch? Have you seen Don't Look Up? Oh, wait, I'm not going to talk about it then. You got to go see it. You just got to see it. You just got to see it. That's what we did for like
I'm
you
not
said,
warning
like
you. I'm not warning audiences against it. You really do have to see it. It's one of those things you got to kind of see. And for that to come along in our culture is kind of a neat deal, but I don't approve of the approach, Joel. I didn't then, and even with satire, I found it a little more palatable because it was a satire, but only a little more.
But like you said, the best moments of satire are those is the the approach to media and the scenes with Tyler Perry and Kate Blanchett, and Mark Rylance. Mark Rylance is just, look, everyone is talking about Meryl Streep and everyone talks about Jonah Hill, because people
Meryl Streep's great, but she just that part could have been anybody. They didn't.
Well, it could, and they're and we're supposed to be like, oh my God, she's even more amazing because Meryl Streep can improvise funny lines. No, it's Meryl Streep. She can, she's been doing that. Don't worry, people.
Sure, she can do it all.
But Mark Rylance was just a treat. Just a spooky treat.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really good performance by him in a fun role. Where if he's not careful, because he plays a similar guy, in Ready Player One.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's not careful, that's all he's ever going to play because he's so good at it. In Ready Player One, he's sort of this thing that we examine but look up to a degree. In this, he's this.
But here's the thing: he might continue to do that in American films, and he'll do his art projects, and he'll stretch his legs and other stuff in British projects and on stage. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens.
But that's my take on Don't Look Up. I didn't like it, but that doesn't mean I hate it or that it's the reason for being here isn't potent. You can't deny that it was.
Right.
And I admire that, but I'll go back to my final thought was truly that challenge to McKay.
Yeah.
If you're going to be one of the top filmmakers of our day, it's my belief that you have to do better. There's one critic who's always going to come after you for failing on that level. He's shown enough now that it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be the easy way.
Right.
He doesn't have to tell us everything. We can experience stuff. The best stuff in this film, the best stuff in these last three films are all that. And frankly, the best stuff about his comedies are that, if Anchorman kept stopping for the Anchorman to explain everything he was thinking and what his plan was all the time, I mean, it wouldn't have been good. It wouldn't have been funny. What's funny is, living your life in the shoes of this madman. It's entertaining and fun. And the parts where you don't understand them are just as fun, if not more fun, than the parts where you do.
Right.
That doesn't seem to have carried to his serious films, but that's because I don't think his serious films are very serious. I think they are meant to be talked about. And on that level, Don't Look Up was a smashing success.
Yeah, indeed.
It was meant to be talked about, and it was. I mean, and and it's got some stuff in it that we need to deal with as a race of people. So in that way, I would not have skipped it. I'm not too good for it.
Yeah.
But I just wish the storytelling was better, man.
Yep.
It can be. And still be zany and crazy and stupid.
Yep. All right. Thank you, dear listeners, for hanging with us for these last, 5 episodes, 6 episodes?
This is the 6th.
This is number 6. So thank you. You know, we covered a lot of ground and we took a lot of time to do it, but we hope that we have given you some films that you're like, oh, wow, that sounds interesting. I'm going to check that out. Or they hated that. That sounds interesting. I'm going to check that out. But we just want to thank you for hanging with us as we talked about the movies of 2021. You can, of course, reach out to us at the movie page with Joel and Ryan on Facebook, our YouTube page. If you are watching the video version of this, like and subscribe, maybe give us a comment. Tell us that we're pretty, because we try to be pretty. And then of course you can reach, we're also on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and you can email us at askjoelandryan@gmail.com. All right, next week we'll come up with something. We've been talking about these movies for a while. It's now we're gonna have to engage that other gray matter of our brain to figure out a topic for next week. But there will be one, we promise you. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us. And until next week, bye-bye.
Bye, 2000.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.